Do you ever draw a building and it just doesn't seem quite right when you finished? It sort of looks okay, but there's some problem somewhere, some tension somewhere, a sort of, I don't know, visual awkwardness that you know something's not quite right, but you can't actually work out what the problem is. You've followed all the perspective rules you know as best you can, but it just hasn't come together, and it's really frustrating. It makes you wonder whether you even want to keep drawing buildings, whether there's any point in architectural drawing for you. Look, I hope this video gives you perhaps some answers as to what mistake you're making. I'm drawing a building right now, copying a drawing one of my online course drawing students has drawn and showed me. And a lot of this building is correct, but I'm copying the mistakes that they've made in drawing this. And they're very common perspective mistakes that I see over and over again. And they may just be the same perspective mistakes that you're making and which are annoying you in the way your drawings look. In a moment, I'll redraw this same building correctly and we'll compare the two and we'll look at what those mistakes are. And most importantly, I'll give you a few tips to help you not make those mistakes again in future. Perspective is not that difficult. It's really quite limited in its principles. We just need to get our head around them really thoroughly. So let's now redraw this same building, but with correct perspective. So now I'll draw this same building that we had in the first drawing, but I'll correct the two main perspective mistakes. Do you think you know what they are? Well, see if I correct them as I draw, as I come up to those parts of this drawing. The truth is, this was a much easier drawing for me to draw. It's very difficult once we understand perspective to really get it wrong. And so don't feel mystified, just persevere. I have a lot of drawing videos, a lot of them are about perspective. It's not hard once it clicks, and sometimes it just needs a new way of explaining to give understanding. So keep persevering if you don't feel it's quite clicked for you just yet, because really it is quite a limited framework. So here I go, just finishing the last part of this building, and then we'll look at the two side by side, see what the differences are and compare them. And as I said, most importantly, I'll explain to you exactly how we can help ourselves to not make these two mistakes in the future. Just finishing the roof and the chimney, and let's have a look. Here we have our two drawings of the same buildings side by side. On the left hand side we have the drawing that has a couple of common perspective errors in it, and on the right hand side we have the drawing that doesn't have those errors. Does the one on the right look somehow more correct, even if you're not exactly sure why? A good question to ask is, where are the main differences between these two drawings? The most obvious one is that on this right-hand side of the building, it more or less comes straight across here, whereas in this right-hand drawing, the top of the building angles down. Perhaps the other main area is not quite as obvious, but it's to do with the angle on the left-hand side wall here. I want to just remind us of a few things about perspective with the correct drawing, and then we'll look at those points in our incorrect drawing and see exactly how those problems show themselves. We know an important part of perspective is our eye level. It's the point that our eyes are level at, or the camera if we take a photo. It's also the point where we're going to get a horizontal line in our drawing. In this drawing, it's about here. Now the other thing we know is that these perspective lines should meet on this eye level. Now this vanishing point isn't necessarily on the paper. And of course this is a freehand drawing, so it is just approximate. But without too much trouble, this one does approximately meet up in the same place. And again, we see that approximately in our freehand drawing, these perspective lines do meet on the eye level as they should. So let's look now at our drawing that's somehow not quite right and see if we can fit it into this framework. Our first problem comes in trying to establish eye level. Eye level is where we end up with a true horizontal line across our scene. If we look at the left-hand side of the building, we can see that this line goes up slightly, this line comes down slightly. The horizontal line is going to be somewhere closer to the top of these windows. It's going to be there. But if we look at the right-hand side of our building, the horizontal line's about here. In fact, all of these lines are pretty horizontal. How do you draw a perspective for a building if eye level is in a different place? Of course, the truth is you can't. Eye level can be anywhere in a scene, but the same eye level is in the whole scene. This is our first mistake, that the eye level is not consistent in all parts of our drawing. This horizontal line, level with the eyes of the observer, somehow seems to change position for different parts of our drawing. Let's have a look now at how things line up for our vanishing points. So we'll put our vanishing point in. We'll just start with the left-hand side. And we can see we have a big problem here. These two perspective lines, although they're a lot more correct than the right-hand side, they're not going to meet up at the same point. This lower perspective line, because it's at quite a steep angle, will hit our eye level relatively close to our building. But this top one, a much more shallow angle, is going right off the paper. And what that means is that the perspective down here and the perspective up here aren't going to blend together well. There's going to be a spot where these angles become cramped, which in the way this is drawn happens down here. This window has to become too small for this window compared with this window and this window, or this window and this window. We can't distribute these angles evenly because they don't meet on eye level. On the right-hand side, the problem is much more obvious. If we make eye level the same line, then this perspective line hits it closer again to the building. And yet our eye level on the other side is almost parallel. These two lines are not going to meet, I don't think, for a couple of meters to the right off our paper. If I erase this and we disregard the left-hand side and we draw our eye level higher up, because our horizontal lines are higher up, what does that mean? That means this line does meet eye level a lot closer. But this one is still going to go a long way past where this one meets eye level. And this is why the building doesn't look quite right. And this is why there's an awkwardness about how this building looks, and it doesn't look quite right. We have the principles of perspective being applied, but they've not been applied with accuracy. So how do we stop this from happening? Let's go back to our good example. The first thing, and the most important thing, is that whenever we're doing a scene that involves perspective, whether there are buildings in it or not, is to ask ourselves, where is eye level? Where is the point that's level with my eye, if it's the scene I'm looking at, or with where the camera was? And establish eye level for the whole scene. And if we have a structure such as a building and we're looking at it at an angle, then despite all the lines going off at angles, on our eye level, lines will be straight, just at that point, the whole way across our scene. And architectural details such as windows will line up in a straight line. Being really clear as to where eye level is can certainly help us getting these angles correct. In most drawings, at least one, if not both of these vanishing points will actually be off the paper. But once we draw one line in, whether it's the bottom line or a top line, in our mind, it's helpful to imagine at what point it meets our eye level, even if it's off the paper. And that we get some sense when we draw this line in that it's going to meet at the same spot. Now, if I'm copying a photo reference, the other thing I can do is simply to measure these angles accurately. And I use my pencil to do that. I measure it off the photo and then I bring it onto my paper. Particularly if I'm drawing something from my imagination, I need to have a sense of how this is working. Now, if I've got eye level in the right place, then I'm not going to have the problem of having eye level in one part of the building in a different place to the other part of the building, because getting eye level fixed in my mind was the very first thing I did. So that's how I overcome this problem of different eye levels for different parts of the building. I get a clear sense of eye level as the very first thing I do before I put the first line on the paper. Now with these perspective lines that don't connect at the right place, again, it's reminding myself that they need to, and having a sense of where eye level is will go a long way to protecting me from making this mistake of having one of these two angles too steep for the other angle. Because once I have a sense of where this is going to hit the vanishing point, even if it's a fair way off the paper, it gives me a guide as to what angle this line needs to be. In a freehand drawing, we really only have to be approximate and it will still look just fine. There's nothing left to do now except there. I thought it looked a bit bare, just standing there by itself, half finished. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I really hope this video's given you some clues of how to think and what to look for when we're drawing. And let me promise you, once it clicks into place, it will become almost impossible for you to draw a building with incorrect perspective. You'll have to concentrate very hard to get it wrong. It will feel so natural. So keep persevering. I have a whole playlist with all my perspective videos together if you're interested. So let's draw some buildings. Have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.